Hello, all. Happy Wednesday. It is a later night, 9:30-ish. Update on Wednesday. Was up at Levi Stadium for practice today, and players who did not practice: Kevin Givens, still dealing with a core muscle injury; Chris Conley, still dealing with a hamstring injury; and Travarius Ward, who is out for personal reasons. Outside of that, limited: Jake Moody, Jauan Jennings, Deebo Samuel, John Feliciano, Christian McCaffrey, Yetur Gross-Matos, whose practice window was open, and Mitch Wishnowsky, who's dealing with a back issue. Yetur Gross-Matos hurt his knee in that preseason game versus the Las Vegas Raiders, tried to play on it. Really, I thought he was going to be the bookend, alongside of Leonard Floyd to Nick Bosa. And unfortunately, man, that was a really scary time. The preseason game with the Raiders, Yetur Gross-Matos hurt his knee on one play. The very next play, Leonard Floyd out with a knee injury. Neither of the one of them went back into the game. Matt and I looked at each other in the press box. We're like, they could be totally screwed for the rest of the season. Turns out Leonard Floyd was fine. Yetur Gross-Matos tried to play a little bit, but ended up needing to have a procedure done. And then they lost Javon Hargrave for the year. So the defensive line has just been, dealing with injuries this whole time. But Yetur Gross-Matos is back, which is good. Saw him at practice doing individual drills. Looks good. I know they wanted to be careful with him. But also Christian McCaffrey back at practice. Looks like he is going to play on Sunday as long as there are no setbacks. Saw him doing his usual high stepping warm ups, catching passes while the running backs were in their session. John Feliciano still working his way back from an knee injury. Deebo wrist, no, he had the wrist, that one's gone. It is the oblique and hip injury for him. Jauan Jennings, it is still that psoas muscle, hip to low, kind of low spine. It is a hip injury, is what they're calling it, but it's his psoas. And then Jake Moody with his high ankle sprain. They released Anders Carlson, so that looks like Jake Moody will be kicking on Sunday, and I think it's, a bunch of these guys come back. I did not see Dre Greenlaw on the practice field today, but Trent Williams said he saw him on Monday with a helmet on, kind of sprinting around. So that's a good sign. I think he could be back. So, George Kittle, no injury designation, none for George Odom, who is dealing with knee injury. So good to see that some of these guys are getting their kind of making their way back. Did see Khalil Davis next to Kalia Davis on the defensive line. I honestly think he's a body that they're bringing in to add depth because Kevin Givens is still not practicing with a core muscle injury. They aren't saying that he needs surgery. They didn't put him on IR, but it's seeming like it's more serious than I think they're leading on to be. So, Jauan Jennings was out there. Deebo Samuel had a blue non-contact jersey, which means, not he is not to be touched or tackled, just kind of let him run through. But other than that, no major updates. Everybody is looking forward to Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the defensive guys that spoke today talked about how Baker Mayfield is playing some of his best football. Nick Bosa has a ton of respect for him. I know there's that whole rivalry between them, but Nick Bosa says it's done. I think, I think after time, you look at how Baker Mayfield was when he first came out of college, and sometimes, it happens with first round picks. But it seems like, he went through a couple of rough years, faced some adversity, and now he seems like he's more mature. He's, coming into his own. He's got a good offensive line. Nick Bosa said this is the best offensive line that they've played thus far. So it's going to be a good challenge for them. Also, Fred Warner said Baker Mayfield is kind of that kind of gritty guy. He'll run and get yards if he needs to. So Christian McCaffrey did not speak to the media today. He may speak on Thursday or Friday. So we did not talk to Christian McCaffrey yet, but is coming. Deebo Samuel spoke today briefly, kind of didn't really go into too much detail about the story that he told, I guess, on the podcast about John Lynch calling him on the trade deadline day. Didn't go into it when media was around, but he did say that during the bye week, went to did Halloween stuff with his son, went back to South Carolina, hung out with his friends for homecoming. So, Yeah, just a kind of a normal Wednesday. And we did a 49ers talk. So download your podcasts. We also did 49ers Now, which is the podcast in a streaming version. So you can always catch that later on YouTube. And then we will do 49ers Now again on Thursday. So we'll be back on Thursday. We'll be talking to Nick Sorensen, Chris Furster, Brock Purdy will talk, probably George Kittle as well. So bunch of interviews coming up on Thursday, but just kind of a usual practice, non-padded practice. I think tomorrow, Thursday, they'll be wearing pads, a little bit longer practice, but it seems like they're getting the momentum going. It's, I think, Christian McCaffrey getting back into the flow of the offense, with Brock Purdy. I mean, Brock Purdy, he's a guy that he's so familiar with, Christian McCaffrey. He's the check down, he can run routes. So, the miscommunications that we've seen with Brock Purdy and maybe a few receivers here and there, I think that won't happen as much. I also think Brock Purdy won't need to scramble as much because focus will be on Christian McCaffrey. And now that there is tape out there that Brock can run, how are defenses going to prepare for facing the scrambling ability of Brock Purdy, the running ability and route running ability of Christian McCaffrey? And then you still have George Kittle. Jauan Jennings is back, third and Jauan. He could take over that X position and really, go up against the cornerbacks because he's so physical. Then there's Ricky Pearsall, who is just a fluid route runner, a guy who can get open in man coverage. But I don't know that the 49ers will face man coverage as much now with Christian McCaffrey on the field. I do think they work him in gradually. Him and JP Mason, who is still dealing with a little bit of a shoulder injury from his subluxation, where it pops out and then they pop it back in. So I think, Matt said, oh, I think they've got to go all out and put Christian McCaffrey in, but I think they're going to be careful with him. I personally think, if they have a couple good drives, they'll take him out, put JP Mason back in and see how that goes. I mean, JP Mason has done a great job thus far. So I don't think there's any reason that they only go Christian McCaffrey and don't use JP Mason. But on those third downs, depending on, I think, the down and distance, maybe then they rely more on Christian McCaffrey. But needless to say, huge piece for the 49ers offense coming back into the fold. Should have another good practice on Thursday as long as nothing goes awry. Christian McCaffrey will be back, Jauan Jennings, and Jake Moody, the three big missing pieces for the offense. And then potentially, this is what they've done. Yeturkos Matos, window is open. There's a chance he plays on Sunday as well. I mean, because any defensive guy, they can go into the rotation. They don't have to play a whole bunch of downs. So it could be that the 49ers are finally getting healthy at this midpoint of the season where all the games will matter. They've got to beat everybody in their division so they can get to the playoffs. I think that's the key this year. All right. More coming to you tomorrow, maybe a little bit earlier. I'll do a Thursday update as well because you guys asked for daily updates. So here they are. So please subscribe since I'm doing them. Just kidding. Thanks for tuning in.